Hey, what's up, everyone? If you are someone who is interested in learning about AWS cloud security assessments or just doing pen testing in cloud security, this is probably a great episode for you. In this episode, we had Seth Art from Metasploitable, who came and spoke about CloudFoxable, a free training platform that he worked on so that people like yourself, me, and others can also learn how to do AWS security. Basically, you would get the scripts to deploy a vulnerable, let's just say kind of vulnerable infrastructure onto AWS account of your choice, and there would be a bit of cost involved, and we'll talk about it as we go into the conversation with the lab. But this is a complete walkthrough, a full tutorial, so follow along, and you should at least be able to get an understanding of where to start when you're trying to do AWS cloud security assessments. If you like video like this, definitely follow or subscribe to our channel because we talk about this every day on the channel. Basically, cloud security is our bread and butter. So if you have a request as well, feel free to drop that as a comment over here, and we'll try our best to make a video on it. Or maybe it's offensive security, maybe it's cloud security, but whatever topic, feel free to drop that as a comment, and we'll try our best to make a video on that as well. Otherwise, in the meanwhile, enjoy this content, and I will see you in the next walkthrough video we do for offensive security in cloud. See ya. Peace.
When you're developing an app, security might be treated as an afterthought. With functionality requirements and tight deadlines, it's easy to accidentally write vulnerable code or use a vulnerable dependency. But Sneak can help you secure your code in real time, so you don't need to slow down to build securely. Develop fast, stay secure. Good developer. Sneak.
Hey, what's up, everyone? So today we're back with Seth again, and this time it's actually about a walkthrough. Instead of just having a conversation about CloudFoxable, offensive security in cloud, as part of this offensive security in cloud month, we wanted to do a walkthrough so you get to visually see what it's like to do actually a challenge. Unfortunately, Seth was kind enough to give us time. I'll let you kind of lead the way on this one, Seth, because you kind of were the creator of this tool as well. You can talk about what CloudFoxable is, and maybe you can use some CloudFox after this as well. So what is CloudFoxable again?
Yeah, thanks, Ashish. So CloudFoxable is a follow-up that I worked on. It's a gamified cloud hacking sandbox, and it has two main purposes. Number one, to teach the art of cloud penetration testing, and also to show you the value, kind of to give you the advanced mode of working with CloudFox, which is a tool, an open source tool we created at Bishop Fox to do cloud pen testing. So we use CloudFox on every AWS cloud pen test we do at Bishop Fox. But even though we develop it and I teach it to a lot of people at Bishop Fox, there's still, advanced features that are kind of not so obvious. So that's why I kind of created CloudFoxable to kind of get you really familiar with CloudFox as one of the tools. And you can actually run other tools against CloudFoxable, but it's, there's a lot of like teaching CloudFox in the environment.
And this is what we were talking about before we started the recording as well, was around the conversation that the aim with CloudFoxable is for people to be able to use this as almost like a playground to start learning more, even if they were starting today versus like they might have 5 security experience, want to just know where their feet in the whole cloud security kind of field as well. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it's really designed for two main user groups: people who are penetration testers that want to learn more about cloud penetration testing. And also it's very doable by people who have a lot of cloud experience, but want to get their feet wet with offensive security, cloud security. In this, I'm going to walk through some of the challenges, but I'm also just going to walk through using CloudFox in this environment. So here is kind of a screen with like a couple of the challenges that right now there's 18 challenges, but I'll kind of walk through how to set it up. And then, so this first flag here is just a setup flag, right? So you say, go to CloudFoxable and clone this GitHub repository. And what you'll need to do is, if you haven't already, you'll need to set up kind of a playground account. You will need to create some kind of user with administrative access so that you can deploy CloudFoxable into your account. And that's a big key point of CloudFoxable. This isn't something that we're hosting at Bishop Fox. We're hosting the gamification, the capture the flag, CTF, at cloudfoxable.bishopfox.com. But you're deploying the environment into your own playground account. So once you create that user that you're going to use to deploy it, you configure your CLI, and now you're ready to clone the repository. And then here is where you're copying a Terraform TFVARS file, kind of the example one that comes with the repo, into one that you're going to manage. And this file is where you're going to enable and disable all of the challenges. So the way I designed CloudFoxable is that if there's challenges that have little or no cost, we're talking like Some of them have like 10 cents a month. So those are still considered, very little cost. Those are enabled by default. But any challenge that's kind of getting into the, dollars, US dollars or more a month, that's when you would have to enable that. It's not enabled by default. Yeah. And then so once you have that configured, you initialize the Terraform. You have to install Terraform and you initialize the repository. You then can do a Terraform plan and a Terraform apply. And now you have vulnerable resources in your Playground account that you can start hacking on to learn this art of pen testing.
So the initial, like the Terraform init, Terraform plan, Terraform apply, this basically, Terraform is an IAC language for people who may be from a cybersecurity background but never heard of Terraform. And init, plan, and apply is just basically you're initializing, you're setting up what needs to be deployed, and apply just deploys the entire thing. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I have a screen over here that I can just show you. So once you do the Terraform apply, what it does is it tells you, so I just redid a Terraform apply because I already had it all. So what we have here is I've just did a Terraform apply. And what you could see here is I've already deployed this environment. So I kind of just reapplied and it said it made no changes.
Yeah.
But it can show you, okay, I've applied it in this account with this user, giving you the scoreboard. And then this is your starting CTF user. And then this is some steps to configure your CLI so that you can use that starting user. And you can verify that the access is working with this command. So the profile that we're going to be using for this whole demo, it's called CloudFoxable. And that's tied to that CTF starting user. And then if you read this thing all the way through, you've actually gotten the first flag. And so you can go over to the website and submit this flag. My favorite part about this whole setup is that this table is dynamic. And actually, I use ChatGPT to help me do some like really cool Terraform stuff to get this to work, because I don't know how to make this as dynamic as it is. But basically, if you enable a challenge and then apply it, it will tell you that that challenge is enabled and how much it costs. So right now I have every challenge enabled, but normally, like I said, by default, it would just be these no cost ones.
Right. Actually, one more question a lot of people would ask in terms of people would have a bit more experience. Is this because you said it's deploying an infrastructure in an AWS account that I have? So I'm running this on my local laptop. I'm not logging into an EC2 instance or whatever to run this. I'm running it from my own personal laptop to initiate this, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can do all of this setup from an EC2 instance, but yes, I'm running this from my laptop. So I'm running the infrastructure as code, the Terraform from my laptop, and it's deploying it to that Playground AWS account that I created for this purpose. So the thing, like you mentioned Terraform, right? For anybody who's not familiar, I was creating these manual challenges for teammates at Bishop Fox, right? But that was through the console. And just like in production environments, big companies don't do that anymore because it's not manageable.
Yeah.
Terraform is a perfect fit for this type of thing because I can create these challenges now and share them with everybody. So anybody can just download the repo, do a Terraform apply, and they have the same challenges in their own account.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for that as well. So first challenge has been successful, I guess. Congrats.
Yeah. So if we got that flag, we'd put it in here and then submit, and then we'd be on the scoreboard.
Awesome. Actually, while you go through this, I'll also, because CTF for a lot of people could be new as well. Like, I think people like you and I who are probably in the offensive space would definitely understand what CTF is, but people who may be in the blue team context, why CTF? And you obviously kind of started off by talking about how CloudFoxable is a gamified version. What's the objective here? Why is CTF format? Is there some thoughts around that as well? Why you went down the spot?
Yeah, CTF, so Capture the Flag, has been around for learning cybersecurity for a long time. There are web application Capture the Flag challenges. There are network and infrastructure Capture the Flag challenges. I mean, really any kind of technology. The idea is that the designer hides a flag. It used to be that it would kind of be like an MD5 sum, but then it's kind of hard to know if you found that MD5 sum. So now the convention, as you'll see here, is to kind of do some kind of like flag or maybe the name of the CTF, curly braces, and then the flag value in the middle. And so for this, you put the whole thing. And so the idea is that you can hide it anywhere. On a web application CTF, maybe you have to exploit SQL injection and the flag is in the database so that you can only get to the flag if you successfully exploit SQL injection. On a network one, maybe it's in the root user's home directory. So you would have to compromise, the server, and then you maybe have to privilege escalate to get to the root, and then you get the flag. And so the same thing for cloud, the places that most of these flags are in files and S3 buckets that you have to have a certain permission to access. And then I'm using AWS Secrets Manager and AWS SSM parameters for a bunch of these flags as well. And the thing to note is that CTFs are trying to be realistic, but up to a point, right? In a real pen test, most of the attacks that I have in CloudFoxable end up with administrative access, right? Every challenge gives you administrative access. So just note that the flag nature sometimes is contrived, right? Like you got to this thing and then it only has one permission, and that's to see this file in this S3 bucket. But, on a real pen test, if you got that far, you probably, found something really great.
Very awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because I think it's definitely worthwhile for people to kind of understand why this gamified version. And it's not just that basically it's a fun activity, but it's also because it's one of the ways where it's kept true to how a TTP may look like in some scenarios, right?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of these challenges are recreations of components that we've exploited on pen tests at BitchFox, right? There's one that my colleague Joe Barcia created called Double Tap, which is almost, except for the very end for the flag, almost a complete recreation of something he found on an engagement. In fact, he found that same thing multiple times. But again, in his pen test, he got administrative access of the entire AWS account. But for Double Tap the challenge, the end of it is you just get access to a flag.
Yeah,
not quite as fun, but at least you get 300 points for it. So
100%. Cool. All right, I'll let you go for the next challenge, man. But thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two ways to do CloudFoxable. One is you can go each individual challenge. It's a secret. It's 50 points. We're going to click it. And what it does is it tells you if it's enabled or disabled by default, what the estimated cost is, where you start from. So in a lot of the challenges, you start from CTF user, but you'll see in some other ones, I'm going to give you a different starting point. And then it kind of walks you through some of the details, maybe gives you the easier ones give you some hints. And so you can do each challenge at a time like that. But there's another way to do CloudFoxable, which is what I've done for this walkthrough that we're doing here is I've deployed all of the challenges, and we can kind of treat it almost like a cloud penetration test where, here, I'll show you. The first thing that we want to do in a cloud penetration test is see like what's around, right? Like what's the inventory? Are we talking about an environment with no lambdas and hundreds of EC2s, no EC2s and hundreds of lambdas, like things like that. And so here first we have CloudFox and CloudFox AWS, and you can see we have like 30 something different commands, but I'm going to do CloudFox AWS profile CloudFoxable inventory v2. And so what this is going to do, it's not going to find everything in the account, but I'm giving you a list of kind of the supported services that I'm looking for. And it's going to go in every region. It's going to look to see, are there any EC2 instances, ECS containers, EKS clusters? And it just gives us two things. It gives us kind of how big is this account that we're about to pen test, and also what regions is it using. One of the most annoying things about AWS is that in the console, you have to switch between region, for each service. And, it's annoying. So it's really nice to know that, well, on this pen test, most of the things are in US West 2. And look at that. There's one CloudFormation stack in US East 1. So, don't forget about that, right? And this is actually a new feature. I finally made inventory dynamic. So it used to be like a long list. And then even if the thing didn't exist, it would tell you. But I'm really proud of the fact that this is dynamic.
Yeah, it definitely is worthwhile because you only see the ones that are there. Otherwise, you don't see it.
Exactly. And I had to do that because we're supporting a lot more things now. So we could see there's 44 roles. And as I'm looking through this as a penetration tester, I'm getting ideas. Okay, so there's CloudFormation stacks. That means I know that there might be some secrets potentially in those CloudFormation stacks. And if I have access to those, or if anybody has access to those, maybe there's a secret that I could find. Or maybe it just gives me more information about the account. Oh, I should stop here and say that we've talked about this on every time you and I have talked, but we're performing this pen test with a white box security auditor type role as our kind of white box enumeration role. That just allows a penetration tester to be more efficient and effective. But we're also on a pen test going to ask the client for an objective-based role. So like, give me a role that a developer would have, or, give me a role that maybe an EC2, a compromised EC2 instance would have. So using just the white box kind of access, we're enumerating everything. So there's DynamoDB tables. So that means that if somebody has the ability to, view those DynamoDB tables, there might be sensitive information there. Some EC2 instances, maybe there's user data scripts that have secrets in them. So I kind of walk through here and I'm kind of getting some ideas of what I want to look for. I can see that they are using SSM parameters. They are using secrets manager. So that might be one of my goals, right? So maybe the trophy target is to get sensitive data from a database.
Yep.
Well, maybe if I can get access to secrets manager, maybe the database password will be in secrets manager. So,
And
yeah.
are the IAM roles excluding the AWS provided IAM roles, or are they including AWS IAM roles?
Yeah, these are including the service roles. So it's the ones you created, but ones that they've created. And actually here, that's a different command. So we can do principals. And so this just quickly shows us all the users and all the roles. And again, I'll walk you through it, but I have to make it nice and so what we see here, what I'm highlighting is that in this count, the 3 users, and it gives me the ARN of those users.
Yeah.
And then you see a whole bunch of roles. So some of these are CloudFoxable created. And then these that I'm highlighting, even though you can't read it, are the system, the AWS service roles. So I'm on a pen test. I know that now I have an inventory.
Yeah.
And so, what's the next thing that I want to do? Now, in CloudFoxable, the CTF starting user is both, right? I gave you the read-only access, the security audit access, but I also gave you some permissions that maybe a user might have. So let's go. There's 2 ways to do this, because I want to know what permissions does CTF user have, CTF starting user. So I can go in the IAM console and I can go to users and I can go to CTF starting user. So we're going to look for the users. We're going to find our user, and you see how there's 4 different policies attached to this user. So security audit, but then it's a secret policy is right here. And then it's got some CloudFox permissions, and it's also got some Bastion SSM permissions. So what you would do in a pen test is you could look through each one of these, right? But that's why we created this permissions command, where you can do permissions against all the users, and that's a nice handy reference. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the permissions command against just this principal. And it's basically saying, what permissions does CTF starting user has? And again, it just basically expands everything we just saw in the GUI in one table. So once again, we're going to get really small.
Interesting.
And we're going to see here, this last line, I'll read it through. It says, CTF starting user has a policy called it's a secret policy, and it can do SSM. It's providing SSM get parameter access for one specific parameter called it's a secret, right? Now I know I can get that flag, right, with that user. So I know the flag is called it's a secret that I have access to. So now there's a CloudFox command called secrets. And this one just enumerates all of the secrets and secrets manager and the SSM parameters. And so here is, it's a secret.
Yeah.
And again, you can do this through the GUI, right? You can kind of go through the GUI and look at all the SSM parameters, look at all the secrets manager secrets. But here is one of the ways that CloudFox really helps you out. So there's a loot file here, and that gives you the SSM or secrets manager command. It pre-populates the command to access the secret. And so this is kind of, I've talked about this a couple of times. This is based on that tool called AWS PX that I loved, how it gives you kind of the next steps. It doesn't do the thing for you. It's kind of teaching people how to fish, right? And so all we need to do is export our profile. I'll show you that in a minute, and grab this command. So we're going to export profile equals CloudFoxable, because that's our CTF starting user. And now this command right here is AWS profile, and then that profile. This just makes it so you can easily copy paste. It pre-populates the region for you, which is always a pain to do manually. SSM get parameter with decryption just in case, and then the name of the secret. And now we have the flag. So now we would enter this flag and we completed the challenge. And so that's one of the really neat things about CloudFox. It shows you things that you can kind of see on the GUI anyway, but hopefully more easily. But it also, whenever possible, tries to give you the next steps to teach you that process. Yeah, so rather than go through a couple more of the challenges, Ashish, I thought maybe it would be cool to kind of just walk through my favorite CloudFox commands that I do on a pen test
Yeah.
against this environment since I have all 18 challenges deployed.
Yeah, I like the idea. Also, because to what you said, that opens the door for others to you've kind of shown the sequence already for how someone can go down the path of exploiting it. But I love the thought process you had as well. Happy for you to kind of pick the favorite ones and maybe talk about some examples as well. That'd be pretty cool.
Okay, awesome. So this command is the first command that was created. So CloudFox was created by Carlos Vengermini, who used to work at Bishop Fox, and me. And this is the first command. So every role can have a role trust policy. It says who can assume that role. And so this command splits that up because roles can be assumed by services,
Yeah.
roles can be assumed by other principals, and roles can be assumed by federated identity like SSO, Okta, AWS SSO, things like that. And
Right.
so this command has evolved now. It gives you 3 separate tables. It kind of splits it up. And it's one of the first things I go for. And the reason it's taking a long time is because by default, each role, it's going to also check, hey, by the way, is that role an administrator? Because on a pen test, those are the ones that we really want to go to. So this was kind of the inception point, right? We wanted to find which roles are trusting root and are they administrator. Now, we've talked about this before, but this whole CloudFoxable is deployed into one account. But on a pen test, you're often testing organizations that have 3, 5, 10, 100, 1,000 AWS accounts.
Yep.
So this cross account role trust, all of these roles are in our account, but sometimes these, like this one, is saying, hey, anybody in account 2895 can assume this role if they have SDS assume role. And
Yep.
so if we also, for some reason, have access to 2895, we can, and we have SDS assume role, we can assume this. So this is one of the most important CloudFox commands for, organization level cross account role trust issues.
Interesting. Would you say, I love this also because from perspective, it kind of opens the door for if you are doing a pen test or if you're thinking about, doing a practice pen test run, a client may give you one account, but now you see, actually, there's another one, 28950. I wonder, so it looks like it may be an org account as well, like the main mothership or for lack of a better word. You can actually ask for that and see, hey, if it's possible for you to kind of go backwards and get over, because that's technically something that client would want to know that, hey, is there like a possibility that someone can go reverse into this organization main account as well if they like to?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to do that during scoping and kickoff, where we kind of say, right, which accounts, we kind of talk to the client, which accounts do you have? Which are you most concerned with? And sometimes we do say, hey, is the organizational management account involved here? Maybe we add that, read-only access to that. So at least we can see, is there any role? Actually, this is super valuable, right? You're not supposed to have any workloads in the organizational management account, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we find that you do have workloads, or if you have roles in the organizational management account that trust less trusted accounts, that's a big problem, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to try to get that access when working with your clients.
Because to your point, you could actually find an account here which would totally be new to the client as well. They would have never seen this account going, I don't know what that account is. I probably need to find out. Is someone else linked into my account which should not have been linked into my account?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so none of the accounts in CloudFoxable have an external ID, but what you will see, right, when you think about, companies like Datadog and Splunk and, companies that organizations use for monitoring, they often have roles that trust root. And this isn't necessarily bad if it's attached to a external ID, right? It's okay if any principal in Datadog's CSPM platform or data, warehouse, product can assume into this role because Datadog has this external ID that only you and Datadog have.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about like a child account or, in your own organization, that's what we're concerned about here.
Yeah.
So that's, a couple of minutes on the principal role trust, but now we get to the trusted service role trust. And this is really interesting. This is kind of a thing that every cloud pen tester kind of gets to the point where they're confused about. Let's say I have EC2 and IAM pass role, right? And a lot of tools will tell you, well, that's a privesc path and that's a high. But here's the catch. If you can pass a role, but you can't create a new role, you're limited to the subset of roles that trust the EC2 service. So the only one, if I, let's say, could run instance or create a new EC2 instance, I can only pass these roles. And so now it's a question of, do any of these roles give me something juicy as an attacker? Maybe do any of these roles have IAM, privileges or some other privileges? And so
Yeah.
that's the neat thing. Like if you might have IAM pass role star and EC2 create run instances star, and it might be a nothing burger, right? It might be like the most you can do is read some S3 bucket that doesn't matter. So that's why we have it like this and sorted like this, is because same thing, like maybe you can create a Lambda function, and that's also why this is-admin is really important. On a real pen test, whenever we see a service role that is admin, that's usually like, oh wait, that's just generally bad practice and also something juicy for us to go for.
No, so I was going to ask in terms of because you mentioned IAM pass role. For people who don't know what IAM pass role is, what's the significance of that?
Yeah, IAM pass role is the way that you can pass a role which is tied to a set of permissions to something that's running, like a Lambda function or an EC2 instance. The idea is, in the old days, the mindset would be, let's say my EC2 instance needs the ability to read files out of an S3 bucket or to send logs to CloudTrail. I'm going to hard code credentials on that EC2 instance that gives them the access to do that. But this idea of passing roles makes that kind of obsolete. You don't have to hard code the credentials. You can basically, when you spin up the EC2 instance, you can say, I'm going to give it the Reyna role, and this Reyna role has the ability to write to buckets. And just the last piece there is that it works through the instance metadata service. So the instance can just kind of say, hey, what role am I? And it happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you.
Yeah. And then the last one we'll talk about is this federated identity. So this is either with SAML or OIDC. And so some roles allow third parties to access them. So here we have one. This is a really fun challenge that I talked about in my Forward CloudSec talk, where there's a role called trodman, and it is assumable by a GitHub action coming from this repo. So what does that mean? That means that anybody who has write access to this repo can potentially assume this trodman role. And so that gets to really fun pen testing challenges as well. And that exists in CloudFoxable. So role trust is a big one. Another one, when you're trying to just get your feet wet, trying to figure out what's in this AWS environment, is the endpoints command. So this is another kind of a conglomerate command like inventory. It looks at app runner, API gateway, CloudFront, EKS, ELB, a bunch of other things. And it says, are there any services that they might not have like an IP address like an EC2 instance, but they have like an AWS endpoint? And here we could see there's two Lambda functions that are potentially, they looks like they might be public. And then here we have an RDS instance that, might or might not be public. So this is a really good one. This is, because we can find a lot of, potentially interesting threads to pull on using this command. And actually here, this first one, furls1, is as simple as, if you use something like CloudFox or you've done it manually, we can actually just go to this URL and we can get the flag. So this is one of the flags that, again, I'm doing it as a pen tester right now, but if you were going through CloudFoxable challenges, it would kind of teach you the art of, which CloudFox command to use, and then this is the flag. And then there's the second version of that Lambda URL that's a little bit more complex.
I definitely loved what was shared so far, because I think that I covered one of the objectives, and we kind of spoke about this, was that people should be able to kind of walk through a AWS account themselves. Hopefully an AWS account they have permission to access and is potentially not production. So should probably started off the conversation by that saying that, but that worthwhile saying it now, that hey, only use it for accounts that you're allowed to use it for, but also the fact that you kind of spoke about the thought process and secrets, and like what some of the example pen tests you would have seen that were used to build the challenges. I think it's a good one to kind of have people get their feet wet in the space. And I guess you called this out already, and while reiterating that the challenges that are called out here are not the only ones that exist out in the wild. There's a lot more, and each conversation or each test that they run may bring them to unique ones. Maybe they can contribute that back into CloudFoxable as well.
Oh, totally. A dream of mine would be that if there's like a public breach and it fits potentially within this CloudFoxable, framework, that we could kind of recreate the next public breach as a CloudFoxable challenge, right?
Oh,
But yeah, but if anybody finds, they have a cool attack path that they don't see, you can either create an issue and we can add new CloudFoxable challenges, or you could do a pull request and create it. Yeah, I was really just honored that, my colleague Joe Barcia, kind of did some of the beta testing for me. And he's like, I want to create this challenge that I saw in a pen test. And he just dropped it in here.
I would definitely look up the double tap one because I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, the double tap one. Yeah. So these 50-point challenges and the 100-point challenges, what they are components of larger attack paths that I've seen, right? So I want to teach the art. It's a secret one we kind of did. A big part of cloud pen testing is you gain access to a new identity. And so usually that means you're kind of going to assume that role. You're going to you got the credentials and now you kind of enter those credentials into your, AWS config file. And now you can, operate as that identity. It's another secret. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. I guess another question, because a lot of the enterprise would also already have single sign-on turned on. Would this apply from a single sign-on perspective? Because you know how you're using a profile and you kind of have the CloudFoxable. And I know we are creating the environment, so you've kind of gone down the path of creating an IAM user. But in a pen test environment where there's actually a single sign-on being used, would people still be able to use CloudFox at that point in time?
So you can use CloudFox with a single sign-on identity.
Awesome.
Absolutely, because you create a profile. So basically, CloudFox operates on profiles.
Okay.
So if you can create it as a profile, you can use CloudFox. But it does change if the organization is using like single sign-on or SSO or something, some federated identity. It's great, right? It means that you are less likely to be able to compromise one of those roles, like from somebody else.
Yeah.
So what we end up doing is, say there's a role that is called developers, and all the developers are in an SSO group that have access to that role. That's where we're kind of going. The first thing I'm doing is I'm scanning through all the permissions attached to that developer role and okay, what are my paths from here? Does it, maybe I can connect to an EC2 instance. Maybe I can create a CloudFormation stack. That's a common path, right? So maybe developers have the ability to launch CloudFormation, but maybe we can attach a role that trusts the CloudFormation service that can do more than what we could do to begin with. And that's a way to progress there.
I mean, to extend that a bit more, then how would this apply to multiple accounts? As you kind of called out, you're definitely at a scenario where there may be a lot more than just one account. This is a one account situation. But in an enterprise context or large organization that people may be looking at, there might be multiple accounts and there'll be a lot of cross accounts and all of that. How does that kind of apply here?
Yeah. So the big components of cross account, just moving laterally, moving laterally across account. Yeah. So the big components of moving laterally across account are looking for role trusts in those other accounts, right? So let's say the prod account has a mistake and it has a role that trusts Ashish, the role named Ashish in the dev account. I'm not Ashish, so my goal is to try to get to a point where I can get to Ashish in dev. And then once I get there, now I know I can assume the prod role. That's one. The other ways that you can go cross account are hard-coded credentials, right? So maybe there is in the dev account, maybe you find an EC2 instance, and maybe that EC2 instance is running Jenkins, and maybe you can compromise that Jenkins, and in the Jenkins secrets, they have a hard-coded credential to push things into production. Or maybe you just create a new pipeline and deploy things into production through Jenkins proper, right? So that's a way. But also S3, we've seen, okay, so you're in the dev account or you're in just some low tier account, you find some S3 bucket that has, there's a lot of different ways that there might be credentials or session stuff there that can then lead you to the production account.
You know how a lot of people are going down the path of doing CICD everywhere as well, where AWS is kind of built by CICD, because the Jenkins, you're like, oh, actually, yeah, because a lot of people don't even have provisioning enabled as well. Do you find that in some of the pen tests you guys engage with, or at least try to teach other people, would you say is CICD component a part of it? Because secret management could happen there as well. Someone would just literally hard code the entire thing in there. Is that a huge part of looking at cloud pen tests as well these days?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I try to encourage our clients to keep that in scope, because it doesn't make sense to only look at, if we're going to look at a compromised or malicious user, right? It doesn't make sense to only look at that user's access to their cloud environment, whether it's AWS or GCP or Azure. It makes
Yeah.
more sense to look at that user holistically, and that user has access to GitHub, and that user has access to CI/CD tools, right? And so, yeah, if the user can create a pipeline, and if that pipeline isn't version controlled and requires reviews by somebody else, all that user needs to do to potentially compromise the account is submit a malicious action or a malicious Jenkins pipeline job. And as an
Basically,
attacker, same thing. I mean, just on the pen test I'm on right now, we found a Jenkins that just is missing authentication entirely.
yeah,
So
yes.
any user can just execute scripts, deploy pipelines. And the neat thing about like tools like Jenkins or BuildKite or any of these CI/CD tools is that usually there's a way to deploy them in multiple accounts.
Yeah.
So, right, the way it works is like Jenkins has like agents running in the prod and the dev and the staging. And so if you have admin access to the main Jenkins, you now have access to admin and stage and dev. Yeah, and actually, if you want to kind of go through that, this trust me challenge is the one where that T. Rodman role in the GitHub Actions. This is a really fun challenge that in order to successfully complete it, you actually create a repo kind of as like your sample vulnerable repo. And I kind of walk you through the whole process. You have to create the repo, and then it ends with you creating a malicious action in that repo that will give you the permission to access the flag.
Yeah, because I'll be really surprised at how many people have a good tight handle on their CI/CD pipeline as well. It's easy as a CISO for me to just scope it down to just your AWS accounts, but it definitely is something I would probably put the entire pipeline in there as well, as like you don't really know what's being deployed or how it's being deployed.
Yeah, it's really hard, right? That expression, the turtle's all the way down, like you have to follow, if you're going to delegate access, right? If you're going to say that Jenkins or GitHub is going to control my production AWS account, well, now you have pushed the RBAC and the authentication and authorization to Jenkins or Git, right? And so whoever has access, you have to really tightly control that. Like another one is Argo CD, right? So the way Argo CD works is that it watches, it's like uses GitOps, right? It watches a GitHub repository. And as soon as there's a change to that GitHub repository, it'll reflect that and like create new pods in a Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah.
So all I need to do is either have admin access to Argo or have write access to the GitOps, repository, and I can, make new containers in production.
That's it.
So,
That's all it would take. No, this was an awesome, man. I think thank you for sharing this as well, because I think the walkthrough was really good. But I think what I'll do is I'll leave I guess people would have heard you, but talk about this in detail about the thought process and what's involved in how Network Pentest 2.0 is the new cloud pen test and all of that. So I'll leave a link for the interview that we did as well together. But this has been valuable for me. Well, before we kind of close, was there anything you want to share with people who are probably looking at this and going, I want to learn this and take this to the next step? Any final thoughts on how people should approach this if you're taking a step back?
Yeah, I mean, for CloudFoxable, I just, hope you enjoy it. There's a scoreboard, which kind of helps keep it fun. You can see the kind of the gamification. There's been a bunch of people that have completed all the challenges. And if you get stuck, you can either go to CloudFoxable on GitHub. There's a discussion forum. Feel free to hit me up directly. I'm happy to help. And if you have any ideas for new challenges, just, submit them as issues. And also, of course, we would, love any feedback or contributions to CloudFox. We have 3 CloudFox commands are community driven and donated. So Wyatt Dallenberg created the network ports command, and Dominic Brucker created the SNS and SQS commands. Oh, he actually created one more too, the network interfaces command. So yeah, it's just really, that's the best compliment you could give us, is to find this tool useful enough to contribute.
Awesome. I will make sure at least we leave a link to the CloudFox as well. But man, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate your time on this, and hopefully we get a lot more contribution, get that word out for CloudFoxable, and have more people doing offensive security as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ashish. Thanks for having me on to talk about this stuff.
Not a problem, man. All right, I'll see you in the next one then. Thanks, man.